Oregon's 2025 recruiting class is at this very moment outside the top 10 nationally. Does that actually matter?
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch the show, which today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. A bold take about the Oregon receiver room and whether it could be more productive than last year. Coming up on today's show, I'll have my reaction to that and my interview from last weekend with Jeffrey Bassa. He had a lot of really good things to say, and we'll talk about the linebackers later on today's show. But the recruiting news is not where Oregon fans would probably like it to be, or those that follow recruiting, because if you go to the 24/7 sports rankings at the moment, Oregon is outside the top 10 now. They were once as high as 4th, and it's gone down to 11. Now, do I expect that to rise? Absolutely. How important is it, though, to land a top 10 class? Is it the be-all, end-all? No. Would I like to see Oregon stack those sorts of classes on top of one another? Yes. In today's college football landscape, this becomes a much more fascinating question to examine because of the transfer portal and the number of players that you can add. And if you go through and project, as you know, I'll do over the coming weeks as we lead up to the season, which is like a month away. Crazy times, but the best of times, because college football is very, very close. Anyway, if you look at that too deep, and particularly just the starting 22 guys on offense and defense, you have a majority of players that were former transfers. Not former high school recruits, not carryovers or holdovers from the Mario Cristobal administration, which there are a couple of those still, Jeff Bassa and Terrence Ferguson most notably. No, you have a majority of players that are starting. Justin Jacobs, transfer, 2 defensive linemen, 3 defensive linemen, all transfers, and 1 corner, transfer, 1 safety, 2 safety, 3 safety, transfer, and depth pieces at the corner. I mean, you just keep going, and you say, well, do you need a top 10 class? Do you have to? Here's the way that I look at this. First of all, my answer to that question is yes. You need to be able to stack top 10 classes. Certainly, you can't fall outside the top 15. The last 4 national champions, which I describe as the modern era of college football with NIL and the portal and post-COVID, where things kind of renormalized in the college football landscape and in society writ large. Once things were back to operating as they were, and then new changes have been implemented, you look at the average recruiting class rankings of teams that win the national championship, the average is actually inside the top 5. And Oregon had a top 5 class in 2024, and going into this season, it looked like they might have another top 5 class. It's still attainable. You might only be a couple players away. And I think the volume that Oregon is going to obtain from the 2025 high school class is going to be smaller. So maybe they do feel that the transfer portal is a way to supplement all of that. Here's the way I look at this, though. The schools that are currently for the high school recruiting class rankings. Remember, there have been no portal moves for 2025. That can't happen until after the season. It happens during bowl season, which is idiotic, dumb, moronic, completely illogical, but that's college football sometimes. Here are the top 10 classes right now. Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Auburn, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Miami, and then there is Oregon currently, according to 24/7, at number 11. Which of those programs is not trying, capable, or desiring, if that's even a word, to win a national championship? I don't see one on there. I've seen Ohio State win one before. I've seen Bama and Georgia and LSU and Auburn. Haven't seen Tennessee. The Volunteers recruiting is what they're trying to do. That's one of the narratives around Tennessee's program right now is, well, look at the way they're recruiting. They're at a top 10 level because that's how you can ascend, because it gives you depth, and oftentimes, yeah, it does give you starters, but it also gives you consistency. Washington is another great example here. So Washington's 2025 recruiting rankings are currently inside 24/7 Sports top 20 nationally at number 18, which for Washington is a good place to be, particularly when you consider what they are expected to be in 2024. That's a team that, look, with transfers can be capable. I think Washington's probably a bowl team this year. But do you know why they're not any better than that? Do you know why there aren't big expectations nationally or frankly internally for the Huskies up in Seattle this season? Because Kalen DeBoer didn't recruit. There are not a bunch of big-time, all-conference caliber, NFL caliber guys up there. Sure, some of them left Washington to go down with Kalen DeBoer to Tuscaloosa and play for the Crimson Tide this year. But a bunch of players weren't left behind. There were players or recruits that followed Mario Cristobal down to Miami. Dan Lanning walked in the door, and he had some really good recruiting classes that had been compiled over the previous couple seasons, convinced several of those guys to stay. And what do you know? Oregon won 10 games in Lanning's first season, built upon that with a 12-win season last year, and hopefully can go beyond that here in 2024. So my answer is forever and always yes, this sort of stuff matters. And if Oregon's high school recruiting class for the 2025 cycle comes in light in the rankings world, if it comes in at 13th or 14th, you might see Oregon have an even heavier emphasis on the transfer portal. Now, that is contingent upon, maybe not necessarily even in 2025, but maybe in 26. Because for the 2025 season, you might be looking at the 23 and 4 classes and saying, okay, these guys who we recruited and have a lot of faith in and belief in what they can be in their Oregon careers, they're ready to play now. They weren't a season ago or they weren't 2 seasons ago, but now they're ready to pop. Now they're ready to make an impact. And I think that this conversation also overlooks the fact that true freshmen make an impact every year, even at Oregon, where they haven't had starting roles necessarily, but they have absolutely made an impact in each of Lanning's first couple of seasons. You talk about Connerly and Jalil Florence, to name a couple. Those were the most prominent ones back in 2022. Jordan James was a true freshman. He made an impact. Like, you might not have starting caliber guys super often because it's really hard. A guy like DeCorian Moore can come in and start right away. But so could Jurion Dickey. And Dickey wasn't healthy at the time. Or Noah Sewell came in and played as a true freshman. So Justin Flo would have done it. Kayvon Thibodeau did that. You can get a select handful of players that do make an impact as a true freshman. So I do think it matters. Is it everything? No, of course not. The poster child is Texas A&M. That's not the only example of schools and teams that underachieve relative to the way that they recruit. But what I notice is just about all of the teams, save for maybe an outlier here or there, like TCU a couple seasons ago, that are getting to the playoff or contending for a national championship, yeah, they're recruiting a top 5-10 level on average over the course of several years. So, yeah, I want to see Oregon get back into that sort of range. There are a number of names, whether it's Jonah Williams, Trey McNutt is committing this Saturday, August 3rd. That's a 5-star safety that Oregon has been after for quite a while. We'll see if they flip Naeem Offord from Ohio State. There's still a lot of chips to fall in this recruiting class, but it's starting to get formalized. I mean, I've only got 2 shows, including this one, left in the month of July. And then we're on to August. I mean, it's real. It's happened. The season's almost here, but that means the recruiting class is winding down. So I absolutely think it still matters. I think the usage of the transfer portal class relative to the high school recruiting class in a given cycle and the volume of guys that were brought in and that have stayed over the course of the years. You know, Lanning says in interviews all the time, he's proud of the fact that Oregon's never lost a starter to the portal in his time as Oregon's head coach. I think that's a really, really good accomplishment. They've lost players, of course, but never a guy who they'd classify as a starter. If that sort of player retention continues for future guys, then maybe they don't have to go to the portal as much. Maybe they really like what they've got in 23 and the 24 classes, and they should, because they're both very highly ranked for a reason. So let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. One of you came at me with a scorching, I mean standing on top of the sun sort of hot take about the receiver room. Or is it? That's coming up next. FanDuel's coming up right now. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets literally anytime that I am in the mood. Everything you could want for Oregon is over there. They've got several individual games like Washington, minus 19.5, Michigan, minus 3.5, Ohio State minus 1.5. Oregon favored right now in every single game they will play this year if the season started today. And the season is just like a month away. It's very, very close. This summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. They've got something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. Don't let it go by the wayside. FanDuel.com, FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. That was some ice cold water for a second segment sip, and that might need to be metaphorically poured upon this next take here from one of you. Not literally, because that would put water on my computer, and then we'd have a problem. So, YouTube comments, X, formerly known as Twitter, you can get into the mailbag at all times. If you want priority access and all sorts of other perks, go join the flock over at Subtext, link in the description below, wherever you listen to or watch the show. Free 14-day trial. You can see if you like it, then it's just $5 a month. If not, absolutely no worries, but you do get all sorts of other perks like priority mailbag access. So, here comes a hot take number one. There are two hot takes in here. The second one isn't quite as hot, but this is a hot take from the Subtext community. There will not be one, not two, but 3 1,000-yard receivers this year in Evans, Tex, I assume that's supposed to be Tez, and my favorite, Trayshawn Holden, who, by the way, has the best touchdown celebration on the team. No arguments there. Trayshawn's touchdown dance is indeed better than any I have seen on this Oregon team. Do you see how flummoxed I am? This qualifies as a hot take. Why? So Oregon had 2,000-yard receivers last year. That had never happened in my entire lifetime of watching Oregon football. The last time it happened, the stats weren't even available on the Oregon website. It has been so long since the Ducks had 2 1,000-yard receivers in the same season. The last 1,000-yard receiver they even had before last year was Dylan Mitchell in 2018. So it had already been 5 years since they had one. They ended up having 2. That helped get Bo Nix to New York City and give Tez Johnson a lot of hype coming into this year, deservedly so. Preseason All Big Ten Conference honoree, whatever that means. It's a strange list that doesn't have a full lineup of offensive and defensive players, but it's 12 guys who everyone in this media panel agreed, yeah, these are the best players in the league, and Tez Johnson was on there. So was Dylan Gabriel. I think both deserve to be there. But if I were to rank this Josh Pate style, this would be about this might be a 10. This is probably a 10. So if Evan Stewart, I assume there are a couple typos in here because there is no receiver whose name is Evans per se, but if Evan Stewart comes over from Texas A&M and has a 1,000-yard season, I will not be surprised. If Tez Johnson comes over or comes back as he's done and has another 1,000-yard season, I will not be surprised. I'd be more surprised if Stewart doesn't hit the 1,000-yard mark this year than Tez, just because I think that Gabriel to Tez Johnson connection is going to be really, really strong. If there were to be a third 1,000-yard receiver this year, yeah, Trayshawn Holden is the guy that I would pick. If Oregon had never brought in Evan Stewart from Texas A&M, who I'm stoked to have, I mean, mega talent, NFL caliber guy, I think Trayshawn Holden can be a solid, not Evan Stewart level, but I think he's capable of being a solid number 1 receiver. And if you had a wide receiving core that was Trayshawn Holden as your starting X and Tez Johnson in the slot and Gary Bryant is your starting Z and they're backed up by Jurion Dickey, Kyler Casper, and whoever else fights their way up the depth chart, Justice Lowe perhaps, yeah, I'd still feel really good about Oregon's receiving core. And I think that position group, maybe more than any other on the team, can survive injuries and not have a significant drop-off, if any, really, in production, as long as Dylan Gabriel remains the quarterback. But this would be a 10. This would be a 10 because having 3,000-yard receivers, I don't have every team's numbers over the past several seasons in front of me. I don't know the last time this happened. Washington just had 3 receivers taken in the NFL draft. Guess what? They did not all have 1,000-yard seasons. Now, could they have gotten there if Jalen McMillan had stayed healthy? Perhaps. I think he had like a 500-600-yard season or so, but he missed a couple of contests because he was hurt. But that also draws more targets for the other guys when they are on the field. Now, Jalen Polk and Roman Dunze both, I believe, hit 1,000 yards a year ago. But I just would be so... Would it be great? Yeah, it would be great. Is this happening? No. No, it is not happening. Yeah, Polk had 1,159 yards last year, Odunze 1,640, McMillan 559. Now, if McMillan had played the whole season, maybe Odunze's around 1,400 and Polk is right at 1,000, and then you can get the extra 300 to 400 or 400 or so that McMillan would need to have 1,000-yard year. But I think one of the other reasons, and this is a good thing, that Oregon's not going to get to that level and why they might not even have 2,000-yard receivers again is because they have a balanced offense. Like Dylan Gabriel, really good quarterback, best in the Big Ten. Is he Michael Penix? No. Are they going to have the same offensive philosophy? Also, no. And I think that that's a great thing for Oregon to be able to win games on the ground. And there are certainly matchups in the Big Ten where you need to have a physical ground game, or you have to have the ability to go toe-to-toe with another team's rushing attack if the weather is not particularly good. Like that Michigan game could be cold or it could snow, or you go to Wisconsin late in November. Those games could be really, really challenging from a weather standpoint to throw the football, and you got to have a ground game and you got to have defense. Defense travels. A passing game, not so much. Like Washington last year, one of the games that they easily could have lost was at Oregon State. That game, torrential downpour. Absolute downpour. And Oregon State should have won. They didn't. Washington found a way because that was just the story of Washington's 2023 season. But I'd prefer to not go into a game thinking, boy, if Oregon's not able to throw the football really effectively, they're not going to be able to do anything on offense because the run game is just not there. So Oregon's going to run the ball too much, and you don't have an offensive philosophy that, allows for the ball to be pushed down the field in the same way. I mean, Will Stein, we saw last year, a lot of RPO, plenty of quick hitters, and he wants, a point guard or surveyor, and I think a 6-year quarterback like Dylan Gabriel is really, really good for that system. But you remember Washington last year, I mean, they pushed the ball down the field a lot. They threw the ball up in 50-50 situations, and guys came down and made the catch. I don't think that's what Oregon's offense is suddenly going to look like. So that's one of the boldest predictions that I have seen. And boy, if Oregon even gets close to it, then we're seeing an offensive output that probably even surpasses what the Ducks did a year ago. And that's the other reason that this take is just a little bit too hot for me. It needs to cool off a little bit. Just leave it maybe in the fridge or the freezer because it's freshly poured coffee, and that's going to burn your tongue if you drink it. Because it's just a little bit too high on the temperature side of things. So I respect it. I respect the thought. I love the question, but no, that is not going to happen. I love the Trayshawn Holden comment, though. Hot take number 2 that came in from this Locked On Ducks insider. We will continue to see the giant duck at key away games that have large bodies of water, like at Madison, Wisconsin, Ann Arbor, Michigan, and others. Look, when Lanning first said he wanted to bring the giant inflatable duck to away games, you thought he was probably joking. I don't think they are joking. I don't. He has said it in other interviews, and the more I look at the way he's talking about it, I go, I think he means it. I think this guy is actually wanting to bring the duck, put it in the equipment truck, blow it up, let it sit there on Friday and all throughout game day, and then take it down and leave and go home, hopefully after an Oregon win. So that's not a hot take. I'm on board with that. Like, I support that, number one. I think Lanning does, and I think it is entirely feasible. Having 3,000-yard receivers, that's tough. That is exceptionally tough. I respect the boldness, though. I really, really do. More to get to. Linebacker chatter, because this is a really interesting position group for Oregon going into this year. It's not the deepest one on defense. In fact, of the 3 units, if you were to lump safeties and corners together, I'd probably separate them. But either linebacker or safety is the unit with the least amount of depth on the defensive side of the ball, making the linebackers that Oregon does have who are ready to contribute in the here and now very, very important. Bryce Boettcher is one of them. His role is important, and I've got a live interview tape with Jeffrey Bassa coming up next. Coming up first, though, Ibotta. Yeah, that's right. Sandals, sunscreen, snacks for the kids. What do all these things have in common? You're probably buying a ton again this summer, but you don't need to stress about the cost. Use Ibotta and get cash back on all your purchases when you stock up on all your summer essentials. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 a year. So what are you waiting for? Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app, and start earning cash back. Use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA, Ibotta, in the Google Play or App Store. Use code LOCKEDONCollege. This episode also brought to you by friends over at Factor. Warmer, sunnier days are calling. Fuel up for them with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. I'm a big food prep guy. Factor is exactly the sort of entity that I'm looking for, because when broadcast season picks up, I just don't have as much time to cook as I do in the summer months when I'm just doing my shows. Factor is great. Their fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. They've got a bunch of options, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you waiting for? Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50. Use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Go check out Factor Meals today. I caught up with Oregon linebacker Jeffrey Bassa last week at Big Ten Media Days, asked him about returning, the outlook of this year's defense, new players in the room. Here's what that sounded like.
Yeah, there was a lot of thoughts and prayers that went into that. I know that, like you said, I was one that kind of tipped off the domino and made everybody else come back as well. But yeah, those were their own decisions, so I can only speak on my behalf. But I think there was a lot of thought process, just sitting down, getting feedback from the NFL, getting feedback from agents on where they seen me getting drafted. And, I wasn't satisfied with that, right? So I kind of used all those grades and all that stuff to put more fuel to the fire, knowing that I had one more year of eligibility, one more year to, go to a new conference and dominate, one more year to get another shot at a national championship. So I was like, why not? That was the real question at the end.
You were recruited originally by Mario Cristobal's staff, and you were one of the players that stayed when there was the change. Talk about the growth or differences in the program between when you first showed up back in 2021 and what you expect Oregon to be this year.
Yeah, I think the program's just been trending in the right direction, from offense to defense to special teams, right? We're always going to be, Oregon was always seen as being an excellent elite type of university, right? But now we're being talked about like Alabama and Georgia being talked about, So I think that's just the way this program is headed in the right direction. And, I appreciate Coach Cristobal for what he did his first year, my first year, I should say. But then, he's on to better and greater things now. But what Coach Lanning has done ever since his sophomore year has been great, and I know that the sky's going to be the limit.
Do you feel like you're the captain of the defense this year with, being a 3-year starter on this Oregon defense and playing that linebacker position?
Oh, for sure, no doubt. Yeah, kind of being that, that guy in the middle. A lot of my teammates like to call me is Jefe. That's the nickname they try to call me. So, yeah, no, I take that role and I run with it, right? So ever since, I remember talking to Coach Lanning my sophomore year, just like, hey, Coach, how can I be a leader? How can I be, more vocal and stuff like that? He was like, there's no, I can't just give it to you. Like, you just go ahead and take it. Like, nobody's doing it right now, so go ahead and take it. So that nickname has kind of stuck with me since high school, and I've just been using that nickname ever since.
Your guys' safety room has seen some turnover from last year. Evan Williams off to the NFL, drafted by the Packers. Steve Stevens not there, and there are some other names too. But there have been players like Kobe Savage who have come in. Talk about your experience with those newcomers in the secondary so far.
Yeah, it's been great. I think those guys have came in and filled the shoes and exceeded those expectations. They've came in and hit the film and hit the weight room real hard, and I think they've been elite so far.
What stands out to you the most about Kobe Savage's game?
I think just how physical he is, how he pulls up in the run. Him being the perfect type of boundary safety, being able to communicate to that backside X, and being able to whether that's play the half or play the post.
Have you played EA College Football 25 yet?
I have, yeah.
Do you like it?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Have you played, as yourself in the game, and what's kind of the coolest thing you've done in the game so far?
Yeah, I've been playing with myself a lot, but the coolest thing that I've done in the game probably have to be just using different teams, like Air Force, using their offense, using the wishbone offense and stuff like that. So
love it. Thanks, Jeff.
I think among linebackers in the conference, for those watching on YouTube, you'll agree with me here, Bassa has to be among the sharpest dressed. He's also just a very polished guy. He was at Pac-12 Media Days last year in Las Vegas. That's when we first saw, his body transformation, and that transformed him as a player. And going into this year, I have extremely high hopes for him as the captain of this Oregon defense at a position group that does not have the same sort of depth that the defensive line does. For instance, I mean, this is the deepest and most talented defensive line Oregon's maybe ever had in my lifetime. I know it doesn't have a Haloti Ngata or a Kayvon Thibodeau or a DeForest Buckner or an Eric Armstead. But that's why I said deepest, not flush with the most NFL talent. Are there NFL guys in there? Yeah. No, there absolutely are. This season, you'll see guys like Jordan Birch or Derek Harmon who can go on to have a career in the NFL, or in the future, some guys like Aiden Breland or Elijah Rushing or Amari Washington, whoever, right? Like there are a lot of different options there. But the linebacker room, the depth chart's just a little bit thinner because you've got Jeff Bassa and Justin Jacobs, who, when healthy, are going to be the starting linebackers. And by all reports, because there have been no reports, they are. And Dan Lanning had some injury updates in his Oregon Media Days presser yesterday. I was not there in person, but caught some clips. Jaleel Florence should be good to go. Noah Whittington should be good to go. There are a couple other question marks out there, but those were the two that stood out the most to me, because those are players who, injury-wise, I have as important players on the depth chart, shall we say. I'm sure many of you do as well. Florence is, according to Zach Neal, still working his way back to full health, but should be close. And I'd expect, given the soundbite there, that he'll be good to go. I think Noah Whittington being healthy is also a really, really big piece to the offense, because I think he and Jordan James are different styles of runners, and having the hot hand approach where you have guys that don't necessarily look the same when they touch the ball, I think that's really important. But getting back to the linebackers here, it's Bassa, it's Jacobs, it's Devin Jackson, I think is a clear number 3, and Bryce Boettcher, who's going to be able to play and doesn't have to report to the Houston Astros training camp, and maybe he can wind up, fingers crossed, with a different organization. I wish Bryce all the best. I know all of you do as well. He's a fantastic athlete, could be a good baseball player. Like, his ceiling's probably like the next Kevin Kiermaier or Kevin Pillar, just one of these guys that is a great defensive center fielder and, hits well enough to be in the major leagues. I'm a Mariners fan. I can't stand the Astros. I can't stand it. So I don't want to have to root for him on the Astros there. But I saw Lanning say this the other day, and I thought about him. Oh, yeah, that's right. He was. Bryce Boettcher was Oregon's 5th leading tackler last year. 5th. 2 of the guys that were ahead of him no longer on the team, Steve Stevens and Evan Williams. Now, Tyshim Johnson is, of course, still there. Jeff Bassa is still there. But Bryce Boettcher was 5th. Is he going to have that sort of role? So this question came in from Corey. Hey, Spencer, love listening to your Locked On Ducks podcast every day. And every day, my man, appreciate you. I think Boettcher's return to football this fall is bigger than most Duck fans realize. Added experience and depth. What kind of role do you see him having in the 2024 season? Similar to last year? Go Ducks. Similar in the sense that he's not a starting linebacker, but will see the field. I do think there is a possibility his playing time is reduced. With the number of bodies that Oregon has defensively and the limitations I think that Boettcher displayed as a linebacker last year, like he's a little bit undersized. He's effective, but does he have NFL prospects? No, that's why he put his name in the Major League Baseball draft, because that's where his professional sports future lies. I think that for Boettcher, will he be top 10 in Oregon in tackles this year? Maybe. But you also have to remember he got a big chunk of playing time early in the season because Justin Jacobs wasn't healthy. So I think Jacobs goes up the tackles list in terms of who has the most on Oregon's defense this year. I think Boettcher probably goes down. But if he's going to be a guy in the 2 deep, yeah, he probably is the number 4 linebacker. Like linebacker unit number 1 is probably Jeff Bassa and Justin Jacobs, and unit number 2 is probably Devin Jackson and Bryce Boettcher. So can I see him being top 10? Yeah, he's at a position where you're going to make a lot of tackles. Linebacker, safety. You go look at depth charts, not just for Oregon, but other teams. Linebackers and safeties typically make the most tackles on the team. Corners, not always involved in the run. Defensive linemen getting caught in the scrum. Those are players that are involved in the run game and are running the most free relative to everybody else on the field. So yeah, I think top 10. I think he probably has a slightly lesser role. I think it's a good thing for Oregon because Jacobs is a more disruptive player on the defensive side of the ball than Boettcher is. But if he's your 4th linebacker, I think you're in really good shape. Keep the questions coming. Appreciate them as always. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.